Hello, I'm Jessie, and welcome back to the Happiness Hippie podcast. There comes a point in adult life when the visible parts of living are no longer satisfying the deeper question underneath them. You may be functioning well, earning, building, deciding, handling responsibility, maybe even succeeding by the usual standards, and still find yourself asking something much older and more difficult. What does any of this mean? The essay we're exploring today, How to Find Meaning in Life, Depth Without Dogma, goes directly into that question, and I'm joined by the author. What I appreciate immediately is that this is not another piece telling people to become more efficient, more branded, more optimized, or more spiritually obedient. It is about the harder work of authorship. As I read it, I kept thinking this essay is really trying to rescue meaning from two kinds of laziness. One is the modern habit of reducing meaning to goals, habits, achievement, and personal performance. The other is the habit of borrowing a complete script from somewhere else and calling that certainty. What this piece seems to argue instead is that a person can live with depth without handing over their agency, and can take meaning seriously without pretending there is only one inherited system that can explain a human life.
It's good to be here, Jesse. I think that is exactly the tension that essay is trying to hold. Many people feel the question of meaning arise at a point when the outer machinery of life is already working. They have learned how to survive, how to function, how to become competent in the ways the world rewards. Then something beneath all that begins to press upward. It may happen after success, which is often disorienting because success was supposed to settle things. It may happen after grief, when life strips away the fantasy that achievement can protect us from pain. Or it may appear during boredom, burnout, or emotional flatness, when life still works on paper but no longer feels inhabited from the inside. That is why meaning cannot be reduced to productivity. The question is not simply, what should I do next? It is, what have I lived? What has it taught me? What do I value now? And what am I actually willing to serve? Those are not convenient questions, and modern culture is not especially good at helping people answer them. On one side, it offers shallow self-improvement. On the other side, it may offer a finished script, complete with approved beliefs and ready-made conclusions. One can leave you exhausted. The other can leave you enclosed.
The distinction you make between meaning and purpose is especially helpful because those words are constantly used as though they were interchangeable, and that creates confusion. People often go hunting for purpose as though purpose alone will solve the deeper ache. But what you suggest is that purpose without meaning can become performance. It may look substantial, even admirable, and still feel hollow. That feels true because there are many people with impressive direction in life who still seem existentially lost. They are doing a great deal, but they do not seem to know what any of it is in service of.
Exactly. Meaning and purpose belong together, but they are not the same thing. Meaning is interpretive. It is how we make sense of joy, loss, memory, failure, love, disappointment, and experience. Meaning asks what life has been trying to show us and what truths we are willing to extract from what we have lived. Purpose is directional. It asks, where should I aim my energy? What am I willing to serve and how I want to participate in the life in front of me? When people confuse the two, they often chase purpose too quickly. They look for a role, a career, a mission, a public identity, something that looks purposeful from the outside. But if that outer direction is not rooted in a deeper interior understanding, it starts feeling performative. You can be very busy and still remain existentially unfed. Meaning gives purpose its interior weight. Without it, purpose becomes one more item on the self-improvement list.
Then the essay takes a broader turn and looks at what you call the old maps. I thought that section was well judged because it does not dismiss religious or spiritual traditions. It gives them their due. They have given generations of people coherence. Moral language, ritual structure, and a sense that life belongs inside something larger. But at the same time, you are very honest that for some people, the old map no longer works or no longer speaks in a way they can honestly inhabit. And that is where a lot of people get stuck. Once the inherited script loses authority, they assume the only remaining option is emptiness.
Yes, and that assumption is one of the most damaging false choices in modern life. People think the options are either total submission to a ready-made meaning system or a flat, indifferent universe where nothing matters. But that is not the only possibility. A person can reject rigid dogma without becoming shallow. They can refuse inherited conclusions without collapsing into nihilism. That is where the phrase depth without dogma becomes useful. It points to a middle ground. You can take the soul seriously without surrendering the right to think. You can speak about responsibility, suffering, joy, love, integrity, presence, and inward life without first agreeing to a rigid creed. This does not mean anything goes. It means meaning must be examined honestly rather than received passively.
That line matters because without dogma can easily be misunderstood as without standards, and that is clearly not what you mean. If anything, a self-authored life may demand more honesty, not less. There is no institution to hide behind, no borrowed script to blame, no sacred language to cover over self-deception. If you are authoring your life, then you are answerable for what you choose to value and how you choose to live.
I think that is one of the heaviest and most liberating parts of agency. Many people say they want freedom, but freedom becomes frightening once they feel its weight. If no culture, parent, algorithm, ideology, guru, or inherited system can fully define a meaningful life for you, then you have to engage in discernment. You have to decide what deserves your devotion. That does not mean you invent yourself out of nothing. No one does that. We are shaped by history, family, opportunity, wounds, biology, culture, and circumstance. But agency asks what we will do with the material we've been given. A person may not choose the raw materials of a life, but authorship begins in how those materials are interpreted, arranged, revised, and consciously lived.
The essay becomes especially strong, I think, when it stops talking about philosophy in broad terms and comes back to listening. You say the first movement of authorship is reflection, not decorative reflection, not polite gratitude journaling that changes nothing, but actual looking. What repeatedly brings me alive? What forms of success leave me cold? Where do I feel most false? What pain keeps returning because I still haven't understood what it wants me to see? Those are not efficiency questions, they are truth questions. And they require patience because quick answers are often just old scripts speaking loudly.
That is exactly right. Meaning usually doesn't arrive fully formed. It emerges through attention. We notice patterns over time. We begin to see that certain achievements didn't nourish us the way we imagined they would. We notice that certain forms of work, service, beauty, care, or creation keep bringing us into contact with something real. We realize that some of our pain has been trying to show us the cost of abandoning ourselves. That is also why emotional clarity matters here. If you can't understand what you feel, it becomes harder to understand what your life is trying to tell you. I'm not saying every wound contains a neat lesson. Some pain is simply painful. But even pain can become part of wisdom if it is translated into conscious understanding, rather than left as raw damage.
That brings us to one of the most practical sections, which is setting down the inherited shoulds. I thought that was one of the most important parts of the whole essay, because so many people are living inside instructions they never really chose. You should want this. You should be married by now. You should earn more. You should be more ambitious. You should be more conventional. You should be less difficult. You should be grateful for the script you were given. And of course, some shoulds point toward maturity, but plenty of them point toward a borrowed life.
Yes, and the word should is often a very useful clue. It tells us where we may still be living under inherited authority. Some inherited expectations are wise. Others belong to an earlier generation, a different temperament, or a version of ourselves that no longer exists. To examine them is not to show contempt for where we came from. It is simply to ask whether they still fit. That process can be relationally costly. The people around us may prefer the older version of us because it was easier to understand or easier to manage. When we stop living by scripts we did not choose, not everyone will applaud the revision. That is part of the cost of authorship. It requires enough self-trust to withstand some misunderstanding.
And then, after all that, the essay finally moves into direction. I liked that order. You do not begin by telling people to find their mission. You begin by listening, examining, questioning, and revising. Then purpose becomes more possible because it grows out of something interior rather than being pasted on from the outside. That seems far healthier than waiting for some cosmic sign or trying to invent a grand purpose that sounds impressive.
I think so too. Purpose can begin very modestly. It may be the choice to become more honest in your closest relationships. It may be a creative practice. It may be service. It may be teaching. It may be craftsmanship. It may be care. It may simply be the decision to build a life that reflects what you know to be true. The size matters less than the sincerity. A self-authored purpose does not have to impress anyone. It has to organize your energy honestly enough that your life begins to take shape around something real. Over time, what you repeatedly choose becomes the architecture of your days. Meaning becomes practical at that point. It stops being something you contemplate from a distance and becomes something you enact.
And perhaps that is why the final section on holding the pen feels so strong. Scripts are easier. They tell us what to chase, who to please, how to measure ourselves, how to speak, what to fear. Even a restrictive script can feel relieving because it removes the burden of choice. But to hold the pen is to accept that no one else can finally live the inner truth of your life for you. That is not always comfortable, but it does sound more alive.
Yes, Jesse, that is the heart of it. To hold the pen is not to control everything. It is to accept the participation. Guidance can help. Tradition can offer real wisdom. Other people can illuminate things we could not see alone. But the final act of interpretation still belongs to the person who must wake each morning inside that life. That is why I close with Carl Jung's line, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That is not self-indulgence, it is responsibility. You do not need rigid dogma to live with depth, and you do not need to call life empty simply because no single system can explain it for you. You can listen inwardly, examine what has shaped you, choose deliberately, revise honestly, and let your life become an expression of what you have come to understand.
That feels like the right thread to carry forward. Meaning is not handed to us fully finished, and perhaps that is not a defect in life, but part of its dignity. The page is open, not because nothing matters, but because our participation matters. We may inherit languages, maps, wounds, loyalties, beliefs, and expectations, but there comes a point when adulthood asks something more difficult from us. Not just survival, not just competence, but authorship. If today's conversation resonated and you want more perspective on emotional clarity or meaningful living, begin at the Our Approach page at happinesshippie.com. And please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for being part of this community. We will talk again soon.